Hi, and welcome to this edition of Georgetown Startup Interns. Today, we're going to talk about meetings. Several topics that we're going to go through in today's session, and here's one example of an agenda. We're going to talk about the pre-work you need to plan ahead before meetings, go into the details of how to create calendar invites, talk about how good meetings are like a diamond shape. We'll also dive into some lessons on psychological safety and crucial conversations, talk about the different ways to decide how to decide. Oftentimes, as an intern, you're not going to be the one who decides. However, it's important to know what the process for making the decision will look like at your organization. I'll then run through some example agendas for meetings. We'll go over how to write a brief, do some note-taking exercises, and finally, like any good meeting, we'll wrap up with a recap, takeaways, and key action items. So before any meeting, you need to plan ahead. And I've got several great acronyms for you tonight. This one, the plan part, involves predetermine your course of action. All right, you want to lay out your goals, adjust your priorities, and be prepared to notify any key personnel. That might be your boss, it might be your boss's boss, it could be other interns, other folks within your organization, and or external stakeholders and personnel. And then as you get ahead of yourself, you want to allow time for acceptance, head into action, expect problems. There's always going to be something that goes wrong. And if you don't have a plan, then you're planning to fail. You also need to realize that it's not just one plan. You don't have plan A. You should always have a plan A, B, C, J, Q, and maybe even a plan Z if everything completely messes up. You know, what's your kind of last line of defense there? So you're ready to adjust your plan and then review your plans daily. So let's talk about creating calendar invites. I'm sure you're at least somewhat familiar with Google Calendar based on your Georgetown accounts that are connected to Google and use Google Calendar. There are a few important variables in calendar invites in a work setting that you want to confirm. The first one is who. Who is required on the invite? Who's coming to the meeting? And are there optional people? In Google and certainly in Outlook, there are ways when you send a calendar invite to say who needs to be there. And then you can also forward the invite later in case you forget people, but I'm trying to set you up for success so you get everybody who needs to be there the first time around when you send it out. You also want to make the location field in the calendar invite really easy to click from a phone, because most people, especially busy colleagues, are going to see the invite on their phone. They're like, oh, all right, I got to join this Zoom. I got to go to this Google Meet. You know, in a post-COVID world, I got to go to this physical address. So if you one tap it from your phone and it's got the zip code and everything, it'll just go right into Google Maps or Waze, whatever navigation app they're using, so they can get directions right there. Similarly, if it's just a regular phone call, make sure the phone number's in the location field. You don't want to have folks, whether it's you or somebody else who's supposed to call you or call someone else, have to dig through their emails to try to find that phone number for this person because they haven't actually created a contact in their phone yet. So for phone calls, I love to do a simple thing that I have here, like Samantha to call Mike at, and then include the cell phone number. I use my number here because it's easy to use in this example. Oftentimes when I'm scheduling a meeting with somebody else, especially if that person is higher up than me, I will say Mike to call Samantha at, and I'll include her cell phone there. And there's two benefits of putting the cell phone there. One is that it makes it easy for you when you get the notification on your phone, oh, this meeting's about to start. You open it up, you just click the number and it's able to start dialing. In the rare circumstances where you don't have the right number or you have their office number and they want you to call their cell phone number, by putting in the location field, the person you're meeting with will see it, be able to double check, make sure you've got the right digits. You also want to set realistic duration for meetings and respect the end time. So if you reach out to somebody and say, hey, do you have 15 minutes to chat? And they say yes, great. Send them a 15-minute calendar invite. Don't send them an invite for 60 minutes. They're gonna be like, what the heck? I told you I'd give you 15 minutes, now you're being greedy and you're trying to take 60 minutes. If you think it's gonna take 60 minutes, then be upfront and say, hey, I'd love to schedule a 60-minute meeting with all of us. Maybe share some of the agenda items you wanna go over so they know why it's gonna take so long. What I have started doing is actually scheduling 20-minute meetings with people. And what that does is gives this amazing buffer in between meetings. So it's not back to back to back to back, and I never have any time to catch my breath. So talk to the people at your organization and see what the cultural expectations are about having meetings that are shorter than 30 or 60 minutes. When you have a 20 or a 25-minute meeting or a 50-minute meeting, it's often really appreciated by everybody else because they have an opportunity to, get up and go to the bathroom, get a bite to eat, stretch their legs, or take notes and actually do the follow-up items from that meeting before their next one starts. You'll also want to learn how to look at the calendars of your coworkers to see when they're available, when you're scheduling things. And when you watch the lesson on emails, there's some recommendations there on how to propose different times for the meeting. And so when you're respecting that time, let's say it's a 1 to 1:20 p.m. meeting, you want to make sure at about, well, first of all, when in the first minute of the meeting, you want to say, hey, thanks for joining me today. Looking forward to talking to you for the next 20 minutes. Reiterate what the expectation is on the timing. You want to do a time check to see if their schedule has changed. Maybe it was originally an hour and they're like, actually, I've only got 30 minutes now. That might change your agenda, the topics you want to talk about sooner rather than later if they're not going to be here for the full time. And if it's a 20-minute meeting, at the 18-minute mark, check in on the time and say, hey, Samantha, just want to check in. Looks like we've only got a couple minutes left. I want to be respectful of your time. Let's just recap what we've talked about and make sure we agree on the action items and next steps. And for recurring meetings, if you have like a weekly one-on-one with your supervisor or there's a weekly team meeting, I highly recommend putting the agenda in a Google Doc and then having that Google Doc just be updated each week. So the prior week's agenda moves further down, you kind of copy it, put it up to the top, add the new date, tweak the items from last week with new updates, and it provides a great running history of everything you've talked about over the past several weeks or months. This is also really useful for you in your internship if you're able to save this running log of agenda items, and at the end of your internship, you can look back, think about all the things that you talked about on a weekly basis with your supervisor, and those are probably going to be some of the core projects that you worked on and things you can put on your resume to highlight your internship experience. So all good meetings have a diamond shape. This is a phenomenal way of thinking about meetings that will really improve your professional acumen and how you can approach meeting with colleagues within your organization, as well as external potential customers or partners. So prior to the meeting, you want to do the prep work, and you come in kind of starting at one point at the top of the diamond. You're going to check in on any action items or things from the last meeting. This is your first meeting. You're going to check in with some introductions. Let them share a little bit of their background. You're going to share a little bit of your background. Most meetings start with a couple minutes of kind of small talk about the weather, the local sports team, how's your family doing? You want to lean into that and build a little bit of rapport with the person you're meeting with. After that, it's time to dive into the agenda. Hopefully you or somebody else in the meeting has come in with a prepared agenda. It's either in the calendar invite typed out there or it's linked to in a Google Doc. So you can go over, hey, here are the key topics we want to discuss in the meeting, and create space there to say, hey, is there anything else you want to add to the agenda? Does this look good? And every meeting should be set up with the goal of making a decision. All right, you don't want to meet just to talk willy-nilly about nothing in particular and end the meeting without having decided on anything or moved any part of the project forward. So it's important in the agenda, you have an idea about what are the decisions you want to make and what are the questions you want to discuss in order to reach the decision by the end of the meeting. So when you get to the end of the meeting, the last 5 or 10 minutes, it's time to talk about what are the key takeaways and what are the commitments. And in terms of takeaways, this is like, what is something did you learn or did other people in the meeting learn or take away? Were there resources shared? Were there perspectives gained? And then what are the commitments? What are the action items that are assigned to people as a result of the meeting? When we talk a little later about note-taking, which may be a role that you're in throughout your internship, it's an opportunity to capture all of the key learnings and takeaways, as well as documenting all of the commitments and action items. They should be assigned to a specific person and have a specific due date. So that way, when you or someone else sends a follow-up recapping the meeting, you're able to highlight or perhaps bold all of the to-do items for anybody that was in the meeting, and sometimes even folks outside the meeting who might have gotten assigned a commitment in the meeting. Last but not least, you want to schedule the next meeting. The goal of every single meeting in your professional career is to get the next meeting. All right, once you're in the room, you have them talking, you're building a relationship, you're strengthening a project, you're moving things forward, you have this momentum. You don't want it to just come to a halt at the end of this 30 or 60-minute meeting. All right, you want to, while you have their time and attention, say, hey, let's just look at our calendars, based on all of the commitments we've got to do, next Tuesday and Wednesday, let's see if we could schedule a follow-up meeting next Thursday. While I have you here, can everybody just pull out their calendar and see if Thursday at 1 p.m. would work next week? And give it 30 seconds, let people check, kind of massage, be willing to figure out what time works best, get a confirmation on when you're going to have the next meeting, So then you can follow up with a recap of the meeting and send out a calendar invite like we just went over on the meeting for next Thursday at 1 o'clock to go over the progress on the project, the commitments that were completed, and talk about the next kind of roadblocks on the path. In terms of follow-up, there's an important note here about your email coming within the first 12 hours, because I have a hypothesis that human beings' memory has about a 12-hour half-life. And that means if you have a 9 a.m. meeting one day, at 9 p.m. that night, you only remember 50% of what you talked about. And if you wait until 9 a.m. the next day, you only remember 25% of what you talked about. So it's important that you send the follow-up email as soon as possible, ideally in that 5 to 10 minute window right after the meeting before somebody's next meeting starts, to do it while it's fresh. You've got all of the things documented, and then folks can use that as momentum to move forward with their items. All right, so now we're going to dive into psychological safety and talk a little bit about crucial conversations. So crucial conversations are conversations where the stakes are high, opinions are varied, and emotions are often boiling pretty hot. It's important to note that you are not going to have any calendar invites for crucial conversations. They're never scheduled. They often may blindside you in the middle of another project. Perhaps you're just sitting on the couch doing something, and a parent or a relative or somebody walks in and they're heated about something. All right. So what I want to equip you with in the next few minutes are some skills to prepare you for these crucial conversations, and learning how to recognize them to set yourself and the other people that are in dialogue with you. And by the way, dialogue is a two-way conversation where there's this like shared pool of meaning in between you and the person you're talking to, and you're each contributing and taking things out of that shared pool of meaning. And you want to approach it from an empathetic and understanding point of view. And one of the ways you do that is by start with the heart. All right, you want to think and reflect, what is it that I want to communicate? What are my opinions and interests in this situation or this discussion or this negotiation? And these conversations will begin with a mutual purpose. You and the other person you're talking to have a mutual objective or purpose you're working towards. So that's the starting gate for crucial conversations. In order for them to continue, it is mandatory that you maintain mutual respect for one another. If at any point someone no longer feels psychologically safe, they'll begin to either go to silence or violence. And when I say silence, this is often recognizable by people literally stopping to talk, people covering their mouth, okay? People looking down, being a little ashamed or bashful. And in some senses, in in-person situations, they're just gonna leave the room, all right? Somebody's so upset that they can't stand to look at you anymore. They've been offended, their mom's been offended, their work has been criticized. There are a lot of things that somebody can say that eliminates the psychological safety from the environment. And so one option, and this often depends on people's personalities and the setting, is that they can go to silence, as we just talked about, or violence. And violence can be in their tone of voice, all right? It doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna punch you in the face, but it means they're fired up, all right? They are often pretty angry. You might hear some profanity thrown around, all right? They feel like they've been attacked. No, you're wrong, you're a stupid, whatever it is. When that starts to happen, it is time to take a deep breath, to take a step back from the content of what you're talking about, all right, and reestablish psychological safety, all right? You might want to say something like, it sounds like that really bothered you or offended you. It looks like that wasn't the best way for me to have delivered that feedback. I'm sorry for the way it made you feel, and I do want to reiterate that it's important that the quality of the work we have improves, or whatever the thing is you want to get to. But you need to learn to recognize when somebody goes to silence or violence, you have to work to reestablish that mutual respect, remind them of the mutual purpose you're working towards, so that you can move forward in the conversation. The other key ingredient of psychological safety is that everybody in the room has a voice. So if you're in the meeting, you should be allowed to speak. Under no circumstances should you or anybody else be in meetings where nobody expects you to talk. And if you are talked, everyone's like, why are you talking? You shouldn't be talking. Like, if you shouldn't be talking, you shouldn't be in the room. All right. And I'll share one of the best examples how I've seen this demonstrated in Georgetown setting. I spent several years coaching the Georgetown men's ultimate frisbee team. And throughout the year, we'd have a few pretty long 2-ish hour team meetings with freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, talking about strategy, what are the team goals, what do we hope to accomplish this season. And we very, very deliberately practice this key tenet of psychological safety by asking the freshmen to go first and to share, what are their goals for the season? For as an individual and as a team, what do you hope to accomplish? And making sure that early on they get to flex those vocal cords and say a few things. Another way to do this in meetings is to have everybody introduce themselves at the beginning. If everybody talks in the first 5 minutes, 10, 20 minutes later, when something comes up, they have an opinion they want to share, they're going to feel comfortable sharing that because they've spoken. If they have never said anything in the room and they're intimidated by the higher up folks that they kind of look up to, whether that's, seniors or professors or your boss or your CEO, if they've never let you speak, it's hard to feel like you can speak when you have something to say. So make sure that everyone has a voice in the room where it happens. And the next concept I want to talk about is your path to action. And so part of this entails recognizing that whenever you act and do something, you're acting that certain way because you felt something. And before you felt something, you told yourself a story. And before the story, you saw and heard something that led to you telling yourself a story about it that made you feel a certain way that then drove you to action. This can be a somewhat complex thing in terms of emotional intelligence to be able to recognize what was your path to action and being able to retrace those steps to think about what it was that you saw or heard that you then told yourself a story. And in most of these cases here, it's probably a negative story, either about somebody you work with or somebody else's opinion or perspective on you or your idea that made you feel angry or sad and frustrated and like you can't do anything right. And maybe it just leads you to say like, oh, I just give up. I can't do it anymore. I'm just gonna like shut it down for the day because of the thing that you saw or heard in the story you told yourself. So one of the ways to overcome some of these challenges is to state your path. And when you're talking to someone, you want to begin, and we got acronyms here. Tonight's all about acronyms. You're going to share your facts. What do you know to be true about the situation, the thing you're trying to decide, solve, figure out? And then you want to tell your story. All right. What is the story you've been telling yourself based on the facts that you saw or heard? All right. Then, and this is really important, you want to ask for the other person to share their path. And in doing so, demonstrate some humility and, acknowledge the fact that you are not an all-knowing being who knows exactly what the right answer is and obviously knows exactly what the other person should be thinking. And if they're not thinking that, then they're stupid or like, it's not the name of the game here. We're creating psychological safety, creating an environment where you can grow and thrive and have open dialogue with other people, often about emotionally charged or intense conversation topics. So by asking for the other's path, you're creating the opportunity for them to share their facts and to tell their story and to understand why it is that they act that way. And the next step is to talk tentatively. And this is a great time to say sentences like, it sounds like, or it feels like, or it looks like. And it's really important when you're talking tentatively like this, that you're not using I or you. You're not saying, well, I hear you're saying this, and then saying that's the bad idea. Just label it. All right? You want to go through the process of labeling what are those emotions or thoughts that you're either, it sounds like, it feels like, it looks like, and then encourage testing and kind of test the water and see, what you thought it sounds like was that right? Are they kind of shaking their head like, yeah, you're right, that is how I felt, or are they like, no, that's not it at all? All right, well, let's take a step back. Can you explain to me a little bit more about, what it does look like from your perspective? And there's a great little one-sentence prayer here at the bottom. Lord, help me to forgive those who sin differently than I. We all sin, and we all do it in different ways. Some people might be a little bit more angry, a little bit more violent, a little bit more silent. They might say or do things differently. And I think that's a great little one-sentence prayer to keep in mind. So as you're listening, you want to listen with this AMP acronym, and then we'll remind you about your ABCs. So AMP stands for ask to get things rolling. All right. Start by asking some questions. have them share part of their story, maybe peel back some layers of the onion to understand where they're coming from. You want to mirror them to confirm their feelings. You can mirror with their body language, all right? If they're nodding, you're nodding. If they're scowling, oh yeah, that does sound bad. You're generating some empathy here, and then trying to paraphrase to acknowledge their story. So if they share their story about, coming in and reviewing the document that you prepared, and they expected it to look a certain way, and you did it to a lower quality. You didn't include certain elements. You might say something like, hey boss, thanks for sharing that story. What it sounds like you expected there to be a color-coded spreadsheet here, breaking down the high, medium, and low priorities. And all I did was write down the priorities, and I didn't actually do that. Does that sound right? Is that kind of, I missed that part of the assignment, and that would have made your job even better, because you said it was hard for you to go meet with your boss because you didn't have all the input you thought you were going to get from me. And sometimes you're not really getting anywhere, and you just have to guess. And so so are you thinking we might go this way? Are you thinking that way? Like, if you're trying to present a decision that needs to get made, just guess. The worst thing they can say is, no, we're not going to go that way. We're actually thinking this way. And at least you've gotten the conversation going and they're flowing in the right direction. So when you have this crucial conversation, and there are often two different sides of the equation, people thinking and feeling different things, one great way to strengthen the bond between the two of you and to get closer to the bottom diamond of that meeting is to identify and label that you agree where you agree. Perhaps you both agree that it has to be due on a certain date, or you both agree on what the color scheme is going to be. And perhaps there's part of what the end product or result is that you have in a vision in your mind, but they didn't mention. So there's an opportunity to build where others leave out key pieces. So let's say Donnie in marketing is going to make a graphic, but your boss didn't mention anything about Donnie. Say, hey, boss, we agree we're going to get this done by 2 weeks from Friday. It's definitely going to be our company's logo and brand colors. One thing I think we can build on the plan is to make sure that we include Donnie in the conversation, because he's going to be the one making the marketing graphic for this project. And then the third part is to compare where you differ. And perhaps you think you've got one tagline idea, and they've got another tagline. So maybe just compare it. And an easy way to lean into this part of a conversation is to simply say, I think I see things differently. Please let me describe how. And then in a calm, composed manner, you can go into what you think the differences are without attacking them or putting down their idea or what they sell things differently, just trying to highlight and emphasize your perspective and what's important to you. So building on all of these skills we have now we're going to talk about how do you decide how to decide. In an internship, it's pretty rare that you're going to be the command decision maker and you're just going to get to make all these decisions and that's it. There are 4 options here I want to lay out. So 1, you're aware that they exist. And 2, as you talk to your boss or other colleagues when you're working on a project, you can ask some of the questions to understand who cares, who knows the information that is input in order to make the decision, who must agree and kind of get their buy-in, what stakeholders, either internally or externally, how many people is it worth involving, right? So all of these factor in. Command decisions are made without involving others. Somebody just decides and decrees, hey, we're doing this. Like oftentimes the higher up you are in the totem pole of the organization, you could just command that, hey, this is what we're doing, this is the path forward, that's the answer. Many instances, especially for you as an intern, you'll need to consult. And this is where you're gathering input from other stakeholders, and then a subset. It might just be you, it might be you and your boss. Boss might give you an assignment and say, hey, go talk to these 5 other people in the organization. They're all going to be affected by what we're doing, so we have to get some input from them. We also know they're going to care what the final decision is. We're not saying we're going to make everybody happy and do exactly what they want, because there are multiple options and some of them might be controversial. Ultimately, the kind of small group within that consulting framework will make the decision and let all of the stakeholders who were consulted and or informed take it from there. The third option is to vote. This is not used very often in a work setting, but it can come in handy in some instances. I'm thinking there might be cases too where you might do like market research and talk to 100 potential customers and have them vote on like which logo or product feature thing they like the best. And last but not least is consensus. This is the hardest one to do in any aspect of life. Trying to get consensus for a group of 8 friends on where to go to dinner or what type of pizza to order, that's pretty hard. Oftentimes somebody just has to make a decision and you move forward with it. And so once the decision is made, the key variables of the decision is who does what, by when, and how will you follow up. So as the intern who may or may not be involved with the note-taking process, when a decision is made, you want to make sure those 4 questions are answered so that you can follow up and see it to completion. So now I'm going to dive into some example agendas. We've got different types of meetings you're going to go into, and here's the first one. So this meeting, this is kind of a boilerplate one. You've got the date, the location, you've got meeting goals, purposes, objectives. If there's any pre-work, reading materials, resources, other presentations or spreadsheets or documents you want folks to read, and then a pretty straightforward agenda, which in this example even has the time broken out on how much time you want to spend on each topic. It's a great way to make sure a meeting runs on time, because if it's 3:20 and you haven't shifted to discussion item 1 yet, you know, hey guys, perhaps you're the timekeeper, even if you're not the officially decreed timekeeper. It's a really valuable thing, especially when you get executives in meetings and they got crazy ideas and they're going all over the place. Sometimes you got to hone it back in. Remember that diamond shape where it starts being divergent at the beginning and then ultimately is converging towards the decisions you want to make in the action items at the end. So here's an agenda framework for a weekly staff meeting. I recommend putting in a Google Doc where everyone can put in their key things they want to talk about. Everybody's got edit access all week. It forces the people in the meeting to collect any data from their teams in advance if they're not in the meeting. You don't necessarily always need the full hour for it, but you block it off. So it means everybody's focused for it. They're not, running at, let's say it's a 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. meeting. At 10:35, they're not like, oh, I got to get to this next thing. No, they blocked off an hour. They got it every week. And if you end early, it means people can work on the action items. Nobody has ever been that upset that a meeting ended early and they got extra time in their day. So maybe there's a lesson there in erring on slightly overbooking folks or scheduling slightly longer meetings, but don't take advantage of it and book like 2-hour blocks when you can do it in 30 minutes. You also want to perhaps ask team members after the meeting to share their notes or what they think their action items or key takeaways are, to make sure everybody's on the same page and that the information is propagated through the organization, sent to other folks. In this example, you have a weekly staff meeting with perhaps a subset, maybe the leadership team or maybe your department, and then once a month you have what's called an all hands meeting. And that's not just your 2 hands, it's literally all of the hands in the company. So everybody who works for the organization will get together and meet. The next 2 slides are about agenda for a weekly one-on-one with your supervisor. So this is the direct report, which would be you. You are the direct report for your manager or your boss. The next slide will talk about what should be their agenda as they're preparing to meet with you. When you have a one-on-one with your boss, it's your job to drive the meeting, right? Ideally, you own the calendar invite, you set up the time. If you have to shift it from week to week based on your availability or their availability, no problem, be flexible. And you should come into each of these one-on-ones with a Google Doc agenda of the priorities, the urgency, what are the things you want to talk about. Don't bury the lead in this agenda. Always make the most important thing the first thing. Within the first 2 to 3 minutes, you should be talking about what is the number one thing that you need help with, where you might have roadblocks or you're stuck or you need additional resources. It's also a good practice to include projects that are important but not urgent. Like maybe you urgently have to figure this thing out for tomorrow's marketing team meeting, but you also have a 2-month project to reimagine the social media strategy. Include that in there, even though it's not pressing for this week. It's a good practice to include your high-level objectives, projects. If you have OKRs or SMART goals, I recommend putting those at the top of the agenda so you can at least remind you and your boss about what are you working towards this quarter or this year. You want to highlight things that are going well, not going well. Be honest here. Nobody wants to see an agenda where everything's green and everything's great. Everything's great. Why do I have to meet with you? All right. It's okay to have parts of your job or business or role or responsibility that are orange or yellow or red and not going that well. Often that's where the most value in these meetings comes from, because somebody you're meeting with can help you solve or at least work towards a solution in those areas. You also want to have any easy wins to celebrate. What went well in the past week? Let's talk about that. Let's celebrate some virtual high fives. Any key questions you have, any decisions that need to be made, think about in advance what are the key factors, and ideally get your superiors to understand why so you can get their buy-in. So on the flip side, here are some agenda topics for your manager that if I was coaching them would say, you'd want to cover these topics in your one-on-one with your direct reports. Start off by asking, how's life outside of work? Don't just dive straight into it. You want to build some rapport and a relationship there. Maybe your intern's overwhelmed with midterms or finals. Maybe somebody in their family is sick. Maybe they're ecstatic that their team, sports team, is winning a lot of games. Have some of that small rapport building chit chat at the beginning. It's great for managers to ask, where do you need more or less direction from me? Do I give you enough feedback? What are your top priorities this week? What skills are you actively developing? How can I help you and support you with that professional growth and development? Is there anything we should start doing or consider changing? And then just kind of at the end, hey, what else is on your mind this week? Being open as a manager to talk through these can really strengthen the bond between the direct report and the manager, as well as set you, the intern, up for professional success. So we did weekly meetings. Often you'll have monthly check-ins. These are a little bit higher level than the weekly check-ins. You'll want to sequence and talk about the upcoming order of events, kind of what comes before what. Is there some prep work we have to do, order of conversations? You might do some human resources, kind of organizational chart review and perhaps shuffling, who on the team is in what roles, go over the objectives and key results or key performance indicators for the monthly report. It's usually a good time to look at your sales pipeline, your lead generation, customer success, how happy are the customers that you currently have, and churn. Churn stands for the customers who were paying you last month, but now are no longer paying you, often because they're not satisfied with the product or service. You want to keep this number as small as possible and also extract information from customers who churned to understand what was it that led them to make that decision. Last but not least, financial metrics should absolutely be reviewed on a monthly basis, if not more frequently. How much money do you have in the bank? What's your cash flow? How much money? Ideally, you have positively monthly cash flow, where at the end of the month, you have more money in your bank account than the beginning of the month because you generated more sales than you had to spend money on the operational expenses. And your burn rate is basically how much money are you burning or spending each month across all of the organizational expenses. Quarterly check-in topics, we go even higher level now. We're probably chilling up in a helicopter, thinking about objectives and key results for a quarterly basis, revenue, headcount, total number of employees, the trajectory for the organization or specific parts of the organization, team performance. Some organizations will do quarterly performance evaluations. Some will do a half-year check-in. Usually once a year, you'll have like an annual performance review in a professional setting, and that's when you'll get feedback on how you've worked over the course of the year. It's important to note it shouldn't just be like a surprise and like one day, once a year in April, they're like, and here's your performance review. This is how you did. If you're not doing a good job, you should know that, and people should have told you in your weekly one-on-ones leading up to it, hey, these are areas for improvement. And then in that performance review, you'll often get perhaps a raise or a bonus or a promotion. Quarterly is also a great time to talk about professional skill development, thinking about the financial forecast and how much runway does the company have. And a runway is like how much cash in the bank, where if we didn't acquire any more customers to pay us any more money, how long can we pay the bills to keep the lights on? The more runway you have, the longer the leadership team can operate the business without waking up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, scared about how they're supposed to make payroll on Friday. All right, so we're getting to the end of this session. This is a really important topic about how to write a brief, and it's hyperlinked here in the slides. I've also attached the link to this article in the training module here on meetings. There are 6 steps to writing a brief, and the outcome is a 1 to 2 page document that can be given to your boss or to key stakeholders in a meeting. Amazon uses this all the time. They don't do PowerPoint presentations I know people present ideas or pitch their ideas, they do briefs, and they're 1 to 2 page documents. Starts with a challenge, where are we now, that has a problem or an opportunity, and goes right into the undesired outcome. What don't we want to happen? Where don't we want to be? And this could happen if we don't address this problem or opportunity right now. Next, now that you've created a little bit of fear or risk or uncertainty, say, hey, here is the desired outcome. This is what we're aiming for. This is our North Star. This would obviously be a better outcome if we can make it happen. And then 4, you get to your proposed solution. So we've got this outcome we want to get to. What's the solution? What can we do to achieve this desired outcome? And then you want to touch on the risk remover and highlight how the proposed solution is likely to succeed, and why some of the risks with the undesired outcome or the original challenge can be removed. And last but not least, your call to action. So call out what decision you want to be made, who's going to do what, by when, and how will we follow up. So when you're young, you work to learn, not to earn. And our hope is that through this internship program, you're going to learn a lot so that your earning potential throughout your entire career is going to skyrocket as a result. And so when it comes to note taking, you can learn a lot by taking notes. My first couple years at Deloitte, I was an entry-level analyst, and I had an affinity for taking really great notes. I was a computer science major, and I could type basically as fast as people could talk. And so a lot of the managers and senior managers and partners learned pretty quickly that, hey, if we invite Mike to this meeting, he'll take great notes and send it out afterwards so we can all have our high-level conversations. He'll document it and be able to prioritize the most important points. We'll know what the key takeaways or decisions were made. I'm a huge fan of the all caps TODO, to do assigning action items. You bold it, you put it in all caps. So when somebody scans down the meeting notes, they're like, oh, okay, here's the to-dos. They might be spliced in throughout the meeting notes. You also might want to take all of the to-dos, put them at the top so that if people don't read all the notes, they know, hey, here are the action items that were assigned. You also want to proofread your notes before you send them out. GTS here stands for Google that shit. People talk about something you don't know, type it in Google, look it up, find a Wikipedia article, get a quick reference. Somebody talks about an article they just read that morning. See if you can find it, link to that in the meeting notes. A lot of people will appreciate that. If you're in the meeting and you can find it and drop it in the chat, if it's a Zoom or a Google Meet or something, even better. So folks who are not up to speed and haven't previously consumed that information can now consume it during the meeting or shortly after. That's another great way to add value. Last but not least, in the note taking, you want to document all the attendees who were there, the date, the time, location, the topic. If there was an agenda, link to that. If there's any other resource reference materials, link to those as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you successfully take notes. And as you're getting to the close of the meeting, remember, it's a diamond shape, so we're getting here to the end of it. You want to play back what you hear. And you can do this throughout just to make sure if they're going too fast or if you didn't quite understand and somebody used an acronym, you can do that. Let me be sure I understood what you're saying. I just want to confirm that I heard you correctly when you said, Donnie from marketing is going to make the social media graphic. It sounds like, it seems like, it looks like. These are all really useful phrases you can use as a meeting attendee to be able to accurately document the topics that were covered, what were the key takeaways, action items, next steps, and hopefully schedule the next meeting. So thank you very much for your time and attention in attending this meeting all about meetings. And I look forward to seeing you at our next meeting on the next topic here at the Georgetown Startup Interns. Thanks. Oh yeah, Elmo, enough already. Let's move on.